No one in the media is quite sure how to handle President Trump's explosive charges yesterday, given the lack of evidence and the fact that he personally blamed his predecessor. Now, during the uproar over Jeff Sessions, who recused himself from any investigation over his previously undisclosed contacts with the Russian ambassador, President Trump tweeted this: "Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism." Also, how low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during the very sacred election process? This is Nixon, Watergate, bad or sick guy. Joining us now to analyze the coverage of this increasingly murky story, Aaron McPike, White House correspondent for Independent Journal Review. Katie Pavlich, editor at townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. And Michael Tomasky, columnist for the Daily Beast. All right, so how should the media treat these presidential tweets about wiretapping with incredibly strong language when the President of the United States so far has offered no evidence?
We have to figure out why he said what he said, where is the evidence, and I think that's what you're seeing from a number of news organizations going after the story. What was it that made Donald Trump tweet that? Now, in the tweet that you just showed, he said, "just found out." When did he find out, and what did he find out?
Right. Some of this is tied to past news stories, Katie. We'll get into that in a moment. But as I said, it seems murky, and I think the media's default position would be, well, the president's just trying to distract from, let's say, the Jeff Sessions controversy, except he's distracting in a direction that takes us back to the whole question of Russia and the Trump campaign.
Right. I think that the president is, as you mentioned, talking about a specific incident when he found out just now. But it's important for the media to cover it in the sense of giving some context about maybe when this would have happened. There were reports from last summer of the Obama Justice Department and the FISA court asking for a warrant to go into Trump Tower and observe a server there. There were questions about Paul Manafort's involvement with the Russian government. So there is some context that needs to be provided. On the other hand, I think that we have to put the media in a position where they can remind people of what the Obama administration really did. I mean, it's not uncommon that the Obama administration went after their political enemies with the use of the government. Let's not forget that the Obama Justice Department collected phone calls and emails of reporters and news executives. They also had the IRS go after Tea Party groups. I mean, this is not something that is out of the question, but the President of the United States, Donald Trump, does have an obligation to provide proof if he's going to make such a clear, well, unclear, but such a staunch accusation about what has happened.
Well, I want to come back to that, but Michael, the president was apparently spurred by a long monologue by Mark Levin, the conservative radio host, which was then picked up by Breitbart, former Steve Bannon website, and run by Bannon, and that seems to be why he went on this Saturday morning tweet storm. Does any of that raise questions for you?
Sure. I mean, well, the questions it raises are about Trump and his mental processes. I mean, most presidents, before they said something like that, would want to talk to their FBI, would want to talk to the Justice Department lawyers, would want to talk to somebody official and try to find out the official thing. Trump doesn't roll that way. We know that already. You know, one of the oldest adages in the American political journalism business is if the president says it, it's news. So I guess, you know, Trump said it or tweeted it, it's news, it needs to be covered, but it needs to be covered with all the caveats that I saw mostly included in what.
Right. Well, one of the questions is even if the FBI gone to this FISA National Security Court in the course of an investigation involving Russia, we actually don't even know whether that request was granted, but would President Obama personally have had any involvement with that? A spokesman for Barack Obama putting out a statement saying neither President Obama nor any White House official ever ordered surveillance on any U.S. citizen, and a suggestion otherwise is simply false. And Aaron, Sean Spicer, the press secretary, tweeting just about 10 minutes before the Sunday shows began today that the reports about this, what he calls potentially politically motivated investigations, are very troubling. The president would like the Hill intelligence committees to expand their investigation to include this. In other words, what did the Obama administration do? And then neither the White House nor the president will comment further. That sounds like an effort to kind of shut it down.
It is, and I would also point out that he didn't just tweet that. The White House put out an official statement from Sean Spicer saying that. Now, I think that was in part to preempt from the press asking questions about this all week long at the briefings, because he obviously wants to turn the page.
By the way, good luck with that.
Right, exactly. I'm sure all of those questions will come, but they obviously want to talk about repealing Obamacare, which is supposed to be on the docket next week in some fashion, and the new travel ban.
Right. Well, we often get accused of of we're chasing the latest flap controversy scandal, but in this case, the President of the United States will put it in play. Let me just play for you, Katie, an exchange on ABC's This Week between one administration official who is out there today on the shows, that is a Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and Martha Raddatz. Take a look.
Let's look into this. If this happened, if this is accurate, this is the biggest overreach and the biggest scandal.
The President of the United States is accusing the former president of wiretapping him.
I think that this is, again, something that if this happened, Martha,
if.
Well, it's hard to hear Martha Raddatz say if, when for the last week we've heard all these questions about Senator Al Franken asking Jeff Sessions a question that was full of ifs, this is true, if there is evidence, if. I mean, the media runs on if things are true or not. So this idea that the president can't make that accusation is interesting coming from the question that she's asking.
Just to give a little context, so, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is out there saying, well, there are questions and they should be investigated. Fine, I'm in favor of getting to the bottom of this.
Sure.
But what Martha Raddatz and other journalists have been arguing is the president stated it as fact. He didn't say allegations. Right. He didn't say he heard this. He said this happened. And as Michael says, you can't not cover it. And
of course not. Right?
And yet we don't know if there's any there.
This is certainly a story that the media should be covering. But if the media is now going to lecture about covering things when there's no there, or accusing the president when they've been covering things for months that really have no evidence, it doesn't really hold a lot of credibility. Now, when it comes to the White House and what they're saying, the president, again, we've been saying this for a long time, cannot just go out and say things without evidence of the claim. And he's put his team into a position where they then have to defend it. And they're saying that they're not going to comment on it because if there's an ongoing investigation, they can't comment on it because it's an ongoing FBI investigation. And there's not a lot of information they can give because people are investigating whether a crime was committed.
The president's team didn't know this was coming, would put them at a further disadvantage. And at the same time, some of the media are just covering this as if it's a conspiracy.
Anybody can accuse anybody of anything. If you're just going to make stuff up about people, anybody can accuse anybody of anything. The point is, both for politicians and for journalists who are in public life and have a responsibility to watch what they say, the point is to make sure there's some kind of grounds for what you're saying about people, whether we're writing it or whether a politician is saying it about another politician. And the coverage of that, when somebody doesn't offer evidence and doesn't seem to have any basis for it that we know about, should be extremely skeptical.
Let me just add, the president hasn't liked leaks. He hasn't liked all of these stories about what's going on inside the White House between all the infighting.
Right.
But he is adding to that because CNN posted a video of a big fight happening inside the Oval Office. He is now kind of at odds with his staff, with, as you said, Sean Spicer putting out this statement trying to shut it down after the president tweeted about this. I mean,
the other hand,
there's back and forth. Maybe there's open war between Trump and his staff.
On the other hand, CNN had a banner headline I saw yesterday, President falsely accuses Obama of wiretapping. I have no evidence that it happened, but I am going to just sort of reserve judgment on the details involving FBI, Russia. And that brings us back to Jeff Sessions, who, there was a sudden firestorm over a Washington Post story reporting that kind of despite what he told the Senate confirmation hearing, that he had a couple of contacts, one substantive in his office as a senator, with the Russian ambassador. Here is the Attorney General talking about it with Tucker Carlson.
Do you see this as a witch hunt?
I don't think what was said about that meeting I had with the Russian ambassador was legitimate. I think it was hyped beyond reason, and I think it was unfair.
The reason Tucker asked that question is that the president said this is a total witch hunt. The Democrats lost the election and now have lost their grip on reality. But when Jeff Sessions, who says that he didn't intend to mislead the committee and he was answering a narrower version of the question, not as a campaign surrogate, when he says it's hyped, wasn't the Washington Post story accurate?
The Washington Post story was accurate. I don't think the reporting on this necessarily was the problem. The reporting was about meetings that occurred. Again, there was no context of what was discussed in the meetings. There's no proof of any wrongdoing. There was no proof of any collusion between Senator Jeff Sessions as a campaign surrogate and the Russian ambassador. So, you know.
And yet the Attorney General on his own decided to recuse himself because the appearance would be, as he himself said,
he is loyal
that he can't be impartial.
And I think he deserves a lot of credit for this because he is loyal to the law, he is loyal to the process. It wasn't that there was a conflict of interest or that there was impartiality, it's that there was an appearance of it and he knew that. And as someone who believes in not having that being an issue, he recused himself. I think he deserves a lot of credit for it. But I will say that the reason why it got so hyped, as Attorney General Sessions talked about, is because Democrats went after him. And yet here we have this long list of Democrats who also met with the Russian ambassador last year and in years before, because it's part of the job description when it comes to being a senator.
Meeting with the Russian ambassador.
But they made it seem like there was.
The question was he completely candid with the Senate committee? And Michael, this brings me to the question of hypocrisy, because a lot of liberal pundits did not criticize the Loretta Lynch and her meeting with Bill Clinton while the Hillary investigation was going on. Now they're up in arms. They want Sessions to resign. And conservative pundits flip depending on which administration is in the dock on this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, welcome to Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, this is always going to happen, and you know, we've got Supreme Court hearings on Neil Gorsuch coming up, and we're going to see Democrats doing things that Republicans would have done while Obama was president. Republicans doing things vice versa. I mean, this is just politics, and you seek political advantage. It's not really shocking or offensive to me.
You are right. Welcome to Washington, but I think it undercuts the credibility of people who have sort of selective outrage. Let me get a break. You can email us about the media. Media Buzz at foxnews.com. Ahead, New York